Now, the budget is on Wednesday. We need to talk about it. We want to find out what should be in it and what isn't going to be in it. So I'm joined by Liam Halligan, GBNews' economics and business editor, and Lord Karan Bilimoria, who's founder and chairman of Cobra Beer, vice president of the Confederation of British Industry. Lovely to see you this morning, chaps. Right, let's start with you, Lord Bilimoria. What should Jeremy Hunt put in this budget?
This budget should be about growth. What happened last September with the irrational exuberance of this growth strategy of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, absolutely the right idea to go for growth, but they went about it the wrong way. And so people in the markets were looking for some stability, which I think we've now got. But what we now need is a very clear plan for growth, because putting up taxes to the highest level in 70 years is not the way to generate growth.
So you advocate some tax cuts?
Absolutely.
He doesn't seem to be indicating this in any of the interviews he's done.
Not just tax cuts. Don't put up corporation tax from 90 to 25 for a start. That's one, but that's just one of many things he shouldn't be doing in terms of putting up taxes. The thresholds have been frozen, so it's not just companies. Individuals are being affected as well, because if your income tax threshold is frozen and you've got inflation running at 10%, that's a huge tax rise. It's a stealth tax. It's a stealth tax.
Liam, we've seen some of his rhetoric around what he's going to announce on Wednesday. I can't say I'm that enthused by it. There's nothing really there. Is this going to be as safe as House's budget because he wants to put off any tax cuts or anything exciting to the electorate until next year because it's before an election?
Well, this won't be the budget of conviction politicians. It will be the Treasury's budget. It will be the Office for Budget Responsibilities budget. It will be very low wattage. Karen's right. Over the next 4 or 5 years, Camilla, given that the top rate of tax threshold is being frozen until 2028, the number of people who are in that top tax bracket is going to double from 4 million to 8 million. So people, middle managers, not particularly senior teachers, not particularly senior policemen and women, will be paying the top rate of tax, the 40% rate of tax. That is astonishingly anti-aspirational and anti-growth. In the building behind you there, Camilla, there are now 40 or 50 Tory MPs. They're part of the Conservative Growth Group. They're not just people who are associated with the right all the time, like John Redwood, who's obviously a low-tax kind of person. A lot of middle-of-the-road Tories are saying now is not the time to put up corporation tax by 6 percentage points, the first rise in corporation tax since 1974. A lot has changed since September. The Treasury spent a lot less money than they thought they would spend, and the OBR thought they would spend, on debt interest, on energy subsidy, because wholesale energy prices have been less. Tax receipts have outperformed. Even the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, the most august, even-handed economic think tank in the land, even they are saying there is a lot of fiscal headroom that they could use, and they are warning if we do put up the shutters, Britain is not open for business, and raise corporation tax, it will cost a lot of investment.
So do we believe them? I think they've said 166 billion.
Well, I always, even as an economist, and maybe because I'm a trained economist, I shy away from, because it's a bit of that, but conceptually they must be right, because the OBR's forecasts have been so wildly out in terms of their gloominess. There is fiscal headroom.
Karen,
I couldn't agree with that more. The OBR always are over pessimistic. This is the reality. There is headroom, but we've got a double whammy here. Not only is corporation tax going up by almost 1/3 from 19 to 25, they're removing the super deduction, which is the incentive to invest for companies of 130%. That was one of Rishi's great moves and it actually worked. We've done the CBI analysis that shows that companies took advantage of this. Now they're taking that away, and we're saying you've got to have an incentive. We're saying, OK, not 130%, even 100% to invest.
But how many people need to say this to them? You know, you've got these US companies pulling out of the UK because we no longer seem attractive for investment.
AstraZeneca.
So you're both saying this.
Ireland.
Who is speaking to Jeremy Hunt? Because he seems to be wanting to do this sort of fix the roof routine, fiscal discipline at all costs. And yet everybody who's a Tory, and indeed people on our People's Panel, and indeed people watching this right now, are saying, for God's sake, give us a tax break. The graphics are clear. clear. The graphics show obviously the corporation tax on the rise. I admit it was much, much lower in the 1970s, but we know what happened to the economy then. The tax burden going up to 38% of national income.
The highest since Clement Attlee.
It's absolutely
the highest
insane.
Since
70 years, 70 years.
But you must be worried about the Conservatives' reputation for being a low tax and indeed fiscally competent party. It's not the party of business anymore, is it?
Well, what really annoys me is this country, less than 1% of the world's population, has been the second or third largest attractor of inward investment in the world. And now we're losing that attraction for being the best place to invest. The City of London, one of the top 2 financial centres in the world. Our tax rates have to be attractive. Our business environment has to be attractive. Otherwise, businesses will vote with their feet, as we're seeing right now. Listing, we'll lose ARM, a company, phenomenal tech company in Cambridge University, Cambridge, that whole Cambridge ecosystem is listing in America.
Yeah, small firms pay corporation tax, Camilla. I mean, the bigger firms, they will take this in their stride. They can use some of the investment offsets that I'm sure the Chancellor will talk about to take the sting out of this rise in the headline corporation tax. But small and medium-sized businesses, they haven't got spare cash to invest. This comes straight off their margin. This means a lot of them will close up and go home. So we've just spent billions keeping a load of businesses alive during lockdown, and now we're going to choke off a lot of those businesses with this corporation tax rise.
Squeeze another 6% off their project margins while they don't need it. Liam, I know you interviewed Lord Lawson for The Telegraph today. Now, obviously, he's associated with being somebody who took the Treasury orthodoxy on.
Absolutely.
What's gone wrong since? Because Liz Truss talked about the so-called blob, you know, being in control. I did a piece today for The Telegraph talking about the very interesting links between the IFS, the OBR and the Treasury. There's a degree of groupthink there. It's a high-tax ideology.
I am from this world. A lot of these top fiscal officials, I was at university with them. I did graduate work, lots of economic research, econometrics in my 20s with these people. A lot of them are friends of mine, people I've known a long time. And there is a monoculture among them. These aren't the kind of people who go into what they do because they want to stand out or come up with other ideas. You do need conviction politicians at turning points in history, and I do think we are at a turning point in history. And I did interview Lord Lawson down on the South Coast last weekend for my Planet Normal podcast on The Telegraph. I wrote it up in The Telegraph today. I've been talking about the interview on GB News, and he doesn't want to see corporation tax rise. And he doesn't want to lay into the government. His word carries huge weight. He's a political icon, a legend, the macroeconomic architect of Thatcherism. And yet he feels that this government is not going to be known for its tax cutting. And he says it's undesirable and counterproductive that the tax burden is where it currently is. And those words will resonate. Those words will resonate.
Lord Bilimoria?
Yeah, and look at the government wants to have a renewable strategy. It wants to incentivise investment in renewables. We're competing with the world, with America, with their Inflation Reduction Act. They've got huge subsidies for renewables. We've got small modular reactors, a nuclear strategy. We've neglected our nuclear industry. We now have companies like Rolls-Royce, which have the ability to set up these small modular reactors that are 1/6 the cost of a giant nuclear plant. They can be put up in 5 years. Have they even started building one? No, the government could easily incentivise that. It should be a priority. There's no urgency.
We should mention one thing, though, shouldn't we, Karen? And this isn't something that the political class has picked up on yet, but tomorrow financial markets are going to be, at best, skittish.
Yes.
At worst, there could be quite a lot of turmoil because a Silicon Valley bank has gone bust in America, and there will be a lot of concern about that. And look, if Jeremy Hunt's looking for a defence of why he's being so cautious, he could use the market turmoil we're going to see over the next few days to say to people like me, to say to people like Karan, Bilimoria, look, now is not the time to take any risks at all. And so it may be that if we can get our arms around this banking crisis in America and the impact on tech firms here, it turns out to be politically convenient for the Chancellor.
How dangerous is that in general? I mean, is it the next Northern Rock or is that overblown?
People like me and Karen, who with reputations in business and economics, we have to be careful about fanning the flames of this. It seems to me that it's not a particularly large bank, but it's a bank where a lot of tech companies that have been heavily invested in with high valuations have banked. And so for that reason, there could be quite a sharp market adjustment.
No, this came out of the blue, and there are lots of tech companies that have got millions, if not hundreds of millions of pounds stuck in that bank that they need to access. They can't afford to lose that. So they've got to do something about that. But I would say, Liam, this is a time not to use this as an excuse, but to double down on growth, on a strategy, and say, come on, look, come to the UK. You can invest here. We're behind you. We've got a growth strategy. That's what's needed, not to say we're going to be cautious, we're going to be borrowing. Borrowing is going to go up to 100%. It's almost 100% of GDP. It was 80%.
You mean debt, national debt? Yeah,
yes.
national debt.
So about 100%. Now, it went up to 250% after the Second World War.
Yes.
We've had the worst global crisis with the pandemic followed by the Ukraine
I'm just
war.
reminded of Ronald Reagan. The deficit's big enough to look after itself. I mean, is there something in that? I don't know.
We're nowhere near that. And even with this cautious strategy, it's forecast to be at 100% 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So we've got to save businesses, we've got to save the jobs, we've got to help consumers. As Liam says, energy costs have come down, there is headroom. So now's the time to be bold for the government.